In this video, I want to talk about my CCI index, a innovation I've developed to drive the process of voluntary education. When you take students out of a transfer student, say, going into a high school, who have spent their whole school career being told what to do and when to do it. This process really gets to be pretty destructive of the curiosity, creativity, and initiative in children. That's the CCI: curiosity, creativity, and initiative. First of all, let's see how this is damaged. Now, when you see young toddlers, and I've seen a lot of them in the large preschool I used to have, and to watch these little kids fly around the place and get involved in all kinds of interesting things with hardly ever a discipline problem, it just shows that kids are born with an enormous amount of creativity and curiosity. I mean, you know, it's not. I don't have to explain that. I'm sure you know that children of little toddlers are just loaded with this stuff. What happens when they become teenagers? I guess it's so common for us to see teenagers who are disinterested and unmotivated and sit around, play video games and watch TV and slouch around the place, keep a messy room and all this stuff. And it's been that way for so long that we assume that that's the natural, the way that teenagers are. Well, they certainly are, but they're not supposed to be that way. We've made them that way through forced unison education. And the damage that that's created in our citizenry is just beyond imagining. For myself, I'm as you might imagine, a hyper-creative person who is always trying to figure out ways. No, that isn't a good way to do it. Let's see, we'll find another way to do it. So in my case, I managed to survive a prep school education, that Ivy League education that was really a forced unison education in big time. And I managed to get through it all with my curiosity and my creativity. I mean, creativity, I'm inventing a whole damn new system of education, so I guess I'm into that stuff. And initiative, I'm really can be a real pest when it comes to getting in there and getting things done. So I've survived it, probably because I had a very cynical attitude about everything. You know, nothing was any good. Schools weren't any good. The teachers were stupid. All that stuff, which I suppose doesn't get you very far in school, but it's a kind of spark that you got to keep inside. That when you grow up to become responsible parents and citizens and all, you need an abundance of that stuff. So the whole, my whole EdSelf system of education, which I'm just giving you a little taste of it here, one of the things that the CCI index is a very powerful thing. I've spent a lot of time, made a point of getting to know a lot of dropouts, at-risk students, and other miscreants that have been in jail, and I've worked down at the state kids jail, youth development center, what it used to be called, because I wanted to find where are the worst kids and what are they about. In my scout troop, I had all kinds of great kids that had parents that made sure that they did all the right things, and they were good kids, and they were had their heads on pretty straight. And so I said, okay, I know all about those kids. Let me go to the far extreme, the other end of where they are. And so I got to know a lot of kids on the street. I used to have a place downtown called Dave's Place. It was a storefront I'd set up, and kids would come in off the streets there. That was a very interesting experience. Did that for about 9 months. And it was kind of a club. Kids had $1 a week joined, and you could come in. There was all kinds of things to do. So, and then I've got to know a lot of kids that were, and some came and lived with us, their family for extended periods of time. So I got to know them in many different ways and how they were made. And curiously enough, I also befriended a number of teens that were the far opposite end of the spectrum. And they were, one was a valedictorian of their high school class, who I got to know very well and spent a lot of time hanging out with all my other deadbeat friends. And there were some others that I knew that were very brilliant, at least to the extent that they had a very good memory, a total recall. And with that, they could breeze through schools, through school with honors at no problem. So it was interesting to compare them. In fact, I may mention it a little later, but I think students who have been very successful in school did it not because they had a high level of creativity and curiosity and initiative, but because they did exactly as they were told, had a good memory, could read a book, and in a night, as one of my friends told me, he said, I can read a book in a night. And he said, I don't even do my homework and I can get straight A's, and that's just the way I am. And he wasn't bragging to me, but I knew him very well, and he says my education was a joke. It was terribly boring. I missed a lot of classes to all this, but that's the other end of the extreme. But I find a commonality between them. And so as I plug this whole experience into my Ed Self system and scenario projected, I thought to myself, how do we get kids who are totally turned off? Say they've struggled through high school and their parents have seen this new school down the street. Well, my kid is doing horribly in high school, and I'll send them down to this crazy place where maybe they can do something with them, because we can. I tell you, that's going to be our specialty, is kids who don't want to learn, have no curiosity. It's kind of a show me, make me kind of an attitude that so many kids have. Although I know some that are very obedient and some work for me. I keep in mind that I mentioned that I employ probably about 9 to 11 late teens that have worked for us for years, and they get kind of a turnover, and they come and work for me. And they're all kinds. And that's the way you really get to know kids, is to hire them. It's amazing. Been very interesting. So, how do you get kids who have absolutely no interest in learning? Their curiosity and their creativity and their initiative is totally shot because it's never been important for them. All the energies they had in that direction didn't apply at all to force unison education and the teaching of a standard curriculum to same age students in unison according to a fixed schedule and promoting them automatically. That production line system is just being creative and having a lot of curiosity that wanders off in all directions. You really have to get rid of it in the name of learning good study habits. This is a reality. I can argue with anybody who wants to argue, an educator who wants to argue, no, that's not at all what happens in schools. I make my day. I'd love to argue with you about that. So how do you get them turned around? Well, say a kid comes out of at-risk high school student transfers to an Ed-Cell school. And initially he'll think, oh man, this is going to be cool. I don't have to do anything down there. But when he arrives and sits down with his blank PC, his personal curriculum schedule, and says, what's all this about? It's blank. What am I supposed to do? And he starts learning that that you can either fill it out or you can go to your desk and sit and stare at the walls. So boredom in this case is a big driving factor. So the index is the real key for measuring the progress of students as they enter the program and develop. The teacher, how it works is the pod coach will observe. A lot of the time he spends in the pod, he spends just hanging out and observing kids and seeing what they do and how they react, rather than telling them what to do. He doesn't tell them, get to work, you're not, why don't you do this, why don't you do that, He's very careful not to do that, because as soon as he does, they're back into the show me what to do, tell me what to do type thing, which we're trying to get them away from. They've got to be self-starting and self-driven. That's what Ed-Self is all about. So in this environment, in these Ed-Self schools, there's all kinds of volunteers and programs and things to sign up for. Those bulletin boards with field trips to go to airplane mechanic places and hangars and construction sites and hospitals and all sorts of interesting things, and volunteers who will come and offer their services to school. Well, a volunteer does not have to know anything about teaching. It does not have to be a good teacher, because our kids have had it with teachers. They're not interested in being taught. But what happens when they sit down in the morning and say, okay, what am I doing today? And then they'll look at all the arrays of interesting things happening, and people, volunteers coming to, and teachers coming to offer a discussion on some interesting factor of their life, some profession, some experience they've had over life. And they'll just come. And the students will gather around, and what happens from then on? Does he start giving a lecture? No, because he's taught. The volunteers go through a video. They watch a video that's very extensive, and it tells them how the thing works. They answer questions. That's what teachers really should do. With proactive students, reactive teachers spend most of their time answering questions. That's what it's about. And what prompts questions? Well, that's curiosity. There's so many teens I know, if their curiosity is totally shot. And so they have a choice. Either they sign up for this thing, well, it'll be boring, So many kids I know, they say, why don't you do this? Why don't you come with me? We'll go down to Boston and we'll go through a museum or something. Nah, that sounds all boring. I don't want to do that. But what turns them around? And what happens is that because they don't want to do something, they go sit at their desk and stare at the wall. That's boredom. But what happens, let's say they get to the point where they say, okay, well, maybe I don't want to do nothing. Maybe this guy is interesting. Now, at the same time, it gets a little complex here. You got to remember that students enter the pod, enter the school on their birthday. So there aren't school years. So consequently, when they sign up, when they enter the school, they're assigned randomly a pod. So they they get their ticket when they first day of school, and they say, you go down to room 24 and see Bill Smith. And ask for Bill Smith. So he'll go down the hallway looking for this thing. Oh, here's this pod, whatever that is, I've got to join. So he goes in and he goes to the teacher, Mr. Smith? And he'll say, no, I'm not Mr. Smith. I was told to ask for Bill Smith. Oh, well, that's one of the students over there. Go there, he is over there with a green shirt on. Oh, okay. And then he said, what's that about? Here, I'm supposed to report to the teacher. No, I'm not. I'm reporting to one of the students, who is one of the older students, more experienced, who will kind of get him under his wing and get him started and situated and all that. In advance, the class, the group, the pod is alerted to the fact that Johnny Jones is going to be here, is going to join our group, and on such and such day, say hi to him, be nice, and help him along. So he's entering the culture shock. is like, whoa, what's this about? So he's going into a classroom, usually a classroom where you sit down, you shut up, and the teacher stands in front and goes, blah, but not here. He enters the pod where all the students there have been there in 1, 2, and 3 years already, and they're already into the system, and they by example, this at-risk student will come in and say, wow, what are these kids doing? They're all signing up. Where'd everybody go? And they said, well, they're all signed up to do things. Do you want to go along and for your first day and check out one of these things? And, well, how about that? Nah, that sounds boring. So after a couple of days of this, he realizes, well, I guess I better sign up for this stuff, or I'm going to be sitting by myself here in the pod. And besides which, when I'm sentenced to my desk, my cubicle, because I haven't chosen anything to do, he says that's kind of a strange feeling. Everybody's running around doing things, and I'm not supposed to speak or interrupt anybody. I'm not while I'm in my do nothing mode. I'm supposed to sit at my desk and not talk with anybody. And that's very important. So he has this feeling of, everybody else is doing it, well, maybe it's something I ought to try out. So there's a lot of peer interaction here that you kind of get into the flow of it. And so this CCI index, all this time, the coach, the pod coach, is watching this new kid that came in, and he's starting to take notes, and he says, okay, to what extent is he showing some curiosity? Is he taking an interest in things? Is he filling out his PC? And in the beginning, it'll probably be very low, and you'll give him a 2 on that. And creativity, what he's doing, is he really getting into it and expanding upon it, and initiative? That's the overall thing, or is he just sitting there like a lump? Or is he up and at 'em? So he rates the student on a scale of 1 to 5 in each of these 3 items. And probably the first time he enters the program, he's probably getting maybe a 3 if he's lucky. But then he will be aware of what his score is. The teacher will give it to him every once in a while, and he'll see it and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, how am I doing on my CCI index? And he says, well, you're not doing very well, and don't seem interested in anything. You're sitting around, you're not participating. All this. Okay, so kids are very responsive to scores, grades, and being competitive with others. And perhaps we'll have a list of all the members of the pod and with their current index listed according to their rating. Top the score is 15, 3 times 5, so this is one way that they will see that, wow, I guess I'm not a very good learner. And then there'll be discussion groups about that very topic. and which the maybe the pod coach will call every once in a while and just sit around. And then, of course, I have mentioned that the Friday afternoon pod wraps, where the whole group is mandatory. You sit down at 12:30 and you talk about the week and can make observations about people. Here, a student might pipe up and say, well, Johnny Jones had just joined us about a month ago. I just want to say that he's doing pretty well. He came in here, he was the dope. Everybody laughs. And but now he's doing this and he's doing that. And that's great. So there's a lot of group peer support here and this sort of thing. So we're talking about here not what's actually learned, but the process of doing it. And this is very important. Have you ever heard of this kind of thing before in any school? A lot of what I'm offering here is already been done in education reform programs that I've known over the years. They've all died away, as I mentioned. But so a lot of this stuff is not new. In fact, the meetings, the pod wrap at the end is a very common thing. They do it in the correctional institutions, as I've observed in the one I worked with, and in democratic schools, alternative private schools. They do this a lot. So it's that's the dynamics of how we do it now. The volunteers. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it in an earlier video, I kind of lose track, but I went and gave a demonstration in a large trade school on a certain kind of trade. I used to do this years ago. And I went there and I got all my stuff out and did my dog and pony show, and there were 50 kids and about 5 teachers all standing around here. And teachers asked all the questions and the kids asked no questions. And so when I said, okay, now let's have just the students ask questions, and big silence, and I could see, this is so interesting to me, because I could see that all these kids were sitting around watching me do my thing. It had to do with formica laminate and countertop work and cabinets and all this. Doing this, giving a demo on how to do it, and so it was a long, pregnant pause, and looked around. And I like pauses. I like silence when you ask a question and there's a silence. Now, teachers very often will chime right in, answer the question. I hate silence because it means that nobody's connecting here. So these silences are very important about, okay, if nobody has any question, then why are we here? That's part of the trick of this kind of student-powered education. But finally, when I'm in this session, and the first kid raised his hand kind of apologetically and said, "Oh, Mr. Douglas, how much money do you make doing this kind of work?" I said, "Okay, well, that's better than nothing." It was very funny. But I've had a lot of experience with kids, and trying to open their eyes to things that they just were absolutely uninterested in. The common experience, the common reaction when you try to interest kids, your own kids. If you've been on a vacation trip and they're all driving along and they're all sitting there doing their Game Boy or whatever, sitting not even looking out the window when you're driving by this beautiful countryside, that's curiosity damage. But now the volunteers. Okay, now the volunteers would get a video and say, okay, now here's the deal. When you come in, and let's say you're going to give a talk, not really a talk, but you're going to just answer questions about this interesting thing that you've done. Maybe you've sailed around the world solo in a boat. One kid I know has done that, know of. There are all kinds of interesting people, and I've met them that you get to talk with, and you say, wow, you really did that once? Yeah. And to me, I'm just asking questions all the time. My CCI index is 15, 18, going all the time. So that volunteers have to learn that don't do not offer any information that isn't requested. Your primary job is to answer questions. And listen to the questions and answer just the questions, and then stop. Now, if the whole group of students that are all sitting around here with the teacher were on the first day of their experience in itself, there'd be a dead silence all around. But when the program is going and you have a lot of experienced EdSelf students who are very proactive, he's going to get a lot of questions. And nobody will have to worry about not being able to, I'm not a teacher, I'm not good at that sort of stuff, but they will draw him out. And how this works is before the session, there might be a resume that the individual might write up a resume of all the things he's done. And there might be a preliminary group of all the kids who are going to meet with him. Let's say this is somebody kind of important, and maybe the former governor of the state or something. This is prime time. You want to be darn sure that when he comes, he really feels like there's a lot of kids that are got a lot of good questions. And the way you get a lot of good questions, you got to know about the individual. So there might be some preliminary study. Either the group gets together and starts writing down questions they want to ask him. So there should be a lot of questions and a lot gained from this experience. So that's the kind of dynamic interaction that you get in student-powered education, and how teacher and how volunteers are in abundance. Because nothing is more satisfying for an experienced older person who's done interesting things to sit down with a bunch of young people and having them grill him and show a real interest. Wow, you've done this, and how did you do that, and what did you feel that? And at the end of the session, he's going home feeling, wow, that was really interesting. I got all these kids that I didn't realize how important what I've done really is. And that there are people in this world that are really interested. So that's how EdSelf works. That's how proactive students and reactive teachers and volunteers create this enormous dynamics that is just driven and controlled, all organized. This is by no means a random thing, and keep in mind that there's a lot of this takes place off campus, where students can go to shops and studios and engineering research labs and all kinds of things where they see the real stuff. That's so important, getting out of the classroom and meeting these people. So I hope you can understand this stuff and begin seeing where I'm coming from and what the possibilities are when you get away from this damn standard curriculum and what I have called weapons of mass instruction. That's where it happens, and that's why this student-driven education is going to be far more powerful and more effective than you could ever imagine. So that's a taste of what I'm talking about. But there's a lot to it. There's a whole computer program that I want to get developed that will keep track of all this, keep all the resources and the people and the schedules and the transportation all worked out in this big scheduling computer system that will keep track of all the students and where they're going, so there's nobody getting stranded out in the wrong place where the group left already because you're late. There's a lot to it. It's like an airline terminal, the schools will become. Anyway, that's that, and you may want to watch this video a second time to get what I'm really talking about. So that's a a half-an-hour discussion on how student-driven individual education works. Thanks for your interest.